Hey, good morning to you all. It is Patrick Lovell coming to you on October 4th, 2022, and it's approximately 10:30 a.m. my time. A lot of crazy stuff going on out there as it is every day, and it all is the story of the story that I've been telling you that nobody understands except for those that benefit from it, and everybody else is just completely clueless to it. And it continues to reveal itself in the most obnoxious, ridiculous, unbelievably like I don't know. I think there's a lot of people this morning asking themselves, okay, what in the world just went on since Friday? Sorry, actually, it was Friday through today, which is Tuesday. And to put this all stuff into perspective, first of all, there was last week, there was this huge crisis in the UK where the Bank of England decided to shore up all of the meltdown in trades to shore up um, the pensions and what's known as the gilts, and they decided they're going to provide as much liquidity as they need to stabilize the bond market. Okay, and why is that important? Well, because people who have worked their entire lives that get paid by the government after their retirement, that's what they depend on to survive. Okay, but there's a lot of other stuff that are that are mixed up in this. Most importantly, are the managers of these giant pools of money that use all sorts of different types of financial instruments to create all sorts of uh, different upside based on the scenarios that are happening and fluctuating throughout all of these different markets. Some of this might be derivatives, sorry. Some of it might be equities. Some of it might be bond purchasing programs. All of them to shore up, and they have these like tentacles in every aspect of how the financial systems work on a global basis. And so these bonds that pay for the pensions, that pay for retirees to be able to survive and afford their monthly nut to get, to the end of their lives, that they actually earn their entire lives, is a big deal. But what's more important to the governments are the values and the assets of the rich people around the world that continue to invest in these types of financial markets. That's what's important to them. So that's one side of the equation. The other side of the equation is Credit Suisse, and my apologies for mispronouncing their name yesterday. I said Bank Suisse for some reason, but Credit Suisse was rumored to be on the edge of insolvency, and what that meant was it was about to have potentially a Lehman moment because of the nature of what we call these systemically important financial institutions, and Credit Suisse is one of them. That after the 2008 great financial crisis revealed is that when one major institution like Lehman Brothers did in 2008 goes bankrupt or becomes insolvent, then their payment schedules and everything that's locked up and loaded with all of these different parameters that I just mentioned of these financial engineered products, and the way the game is played on a daily basis for yield. Yield is to try to get the difference between what you bought it at and what it makes the day before you sell it, and you maneuver all sorts of things to be able to pull out fees and that sort of thing. Um, that when when one melts down because of the counterparty risk, particularly through derivatives trades, which is a whole other sequence of events, that it could create what's known as contagion. And once contagion happens, then we're in a global meltdown. And then suddenly liquidity, the ability for banks to loan into the marketplace to be able to keep businesses afloat and that sort of thing that people depend on for their incomes to purchase the products that we all produce, and get into the marketplace, just all dries up. And the next thing you know, everything collapses and we have either a Great Recession or a depression. Now, in 2008, it's been known as the Great Recession, but it was a depression for everybody who went through it, and it was actually the Gilded Age for everybody who benefited from it. And that's what I revealed to you on the con. So what happened between Sunday and today was that when these types of things have happened in the past, and I just happened to read an article from Pam Martins and Bulls on Wall Street on Parade, and she's been a broker, not a broker, but in the financial business for a long time before she became a muckraking journalist. We're probably talking 40 years, right? Maybe longer than that. I'm not quite sure, but she's seen just about everything. And she wrote this article this morning that's like, okay, wait a second. When these types of indicators happen, typically global markets run. And everybody's been anticipating, because of what the Federal Reserve has been involved with to try to tackle inflation by increasing interest rates and decreasing what's known as quantitative easing into what's known as quantitative tightening to get rid of easy money in this system. That suddenly, they've been debating, for a long time whether or not they're going to be able to create a soft landing or there's going to be a full-on crash. And the big question is, the big conundrum is whether or not can you tackle inflation while at the same time, doing the tightening. Well, the problem has been for the last 13 years that all of these markets have gotten addicted to easy money, like a heroin junkie is addicted to heroin. I mean, it's that simple. It's like once you get on this, you can't get off of it, and that's what this easy money has been doing. But there's so much more to it, and it's what's undergirded by what we reveal to you in my work. Okay, so Credit Suisse looked like it was on the verge of insolvency on Sunday. At least that was the rumor. And if you looked at the market's performance yesterday, it went up 1,000 points on the Dow. And I think as of right now, it's it's booming. Okay, so we're like 800 points today. So great for people who are in the market, especially retirees that depend on their, portfolios for really quite frankly, what they live on. And a lot of those people work their entire lives, like my parents, and they invested and were very diligent and disciplined and deserve the upside, right? But they themselves are recipients, for example, like everybody else in this situation, of this incredibly mythical situation. Okay, it has nothing to do with the fundamentals. It has nothing to do with the discipline of supply and demand. It has everything to do with corruption. Okay, and a mythology that's insane because again, we were literally looking at a potential global run, and what we've heard this morning, for example, are a few things that are very important. The first is that it might, and this is rumor, by the way, because you can't even really get any journalism on this stuff, and it seems to me like all of the rumors that make any sense are from insiders on Twitter. I've seen this over and over because they usually play itself out in very accurate ways. And I'm connected to a lot of these people as well. So Pam Martin's talked about the plunge protection team. There's a plunge protection team at the Federal Reserve and at the Treasury. Sorry for that. So it's the Treasury and the Federal Reserve have plunge protection teams. So these are like, think about like special forces that go in and calibrate whatever the kind of the flows have to be in these capital flows and what the Federal Reserve can pump into the markets, to stabilize currencies and everything else in this game that's going on that has 50 million different ways it's being played. In this particular case, it's rumored that the Federal Reserve provided $650 billion of liquidity to the Bank of England. Okay, now, if this were World War II and we were doing this to get all sorts of ammunitions and whatever we needed to do to defeat the Nazis, okay, that would be one thing. But what we're doing here is propping up fraud and a global criminal syndicate to maintain the asset values of the most rich and the richest countries and those that's what we're doing. Okay, so there's a religious holiday that's happening in Judaism based on what is the holiest day in Judaism. It's called Yom Kippur, and it's where you basically you pray all day for a period of time, and you ask God for forgiveness, and then you're thought of in these traditions of being able to really think deeply and connect with God on a spiritual way. That all of the mistakes that you've made from the previous year, you beg for forgiveness. And then, at the end of it, after the sacrifice of fasting and, thinking deeply and meditating on all of these issues and trying to have your come to God moment, that, the book of your life is sealed for the next year. So every year you get kind of a new fresh start to go again, right? Now, the tradition is in Catholicism, of course. You can go to your priest and you can ask for forgiveness. And every other religion has these types of sorts of constructs, right? And I keep thinking to myself, given this sort of scenario that I'm talking about, is that literally trillions of dollars over the course of the last 13 years have endlessly flowed to criminals that are pulling, Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama are really the most guilty for this comment, considering their level of expertise and their education and their specificity with words. Is they said, yeah, it's shenanigans. Shenanigans are what children do in the back seat when they're trying to one up each other or maybe get the other in trouble, or they're trying to, kind of, leverage something to like get the other's attention or to press buttons or whatever. That's shenanigans. This is insanely, incredibly universal corruption. And it's unstoppable because nobody knows how it works. Patrick Lovell, that's who I am. I'm a muckraking journalist, an investigative journalist, and a guy who deeply, deeply, deeply cares about the integrity of law and the integrity of democracy and the purpose and the genuine everything that the United States is supposed to be, that I now know that we're not completely. We're the perverse inverse of everything that we think we are because it's all a massive lie. And it gave birth to the massive lie of just a moron who's the ultimate expression of the worst that this system has to offer in the vein of Donald Trump. Donald Trump is just an expression of what's happening in a much bigger way. He's literally a mid-level player, but he's going to do some major damage, and he's going to continue to do damage the more he gets away with what he's gotten away with. But it's the system that he's involved with. There's another push, right? So if you look back, and I've mentioned to many of you before, on many times, that I literally know the rise of the Third Reich and Hitler and everything that went into that time period like the back of my hand. Adolf Hitler was kind of at a dead end. At the time period of the late 20s, because things were thriving. When people were doing well, they were dancing, they were singing, they were creating art, they were doing things that made them lively and dynamic and happy, and they didn't, think about Adolf Hitler. He actually had gone to prison. He wrote Mein Kampf, and then he's kind of like subjugated to just nobody's listening. And then suddenly, the Great Depression happened. And there was so much misery and there was so much carnage that he was so easily at that point able to consolidate those on the downside to create what ultimately became the Third Reich. And the devastation that they created was unbelievable. And it took many, 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 many years and many, many millions of lives and so much suffering and so much commitment to finally overcome what Hitler put in action as a result of this type of stuff, right? I don't know what's going to happen next. All I know is you can't live a lie. You cannot ask God for forgiveness and expect to get into the gates of heaven if there is a God and truth means something. That's the biggest conundrum that I continue to have. What I continue to tell you is that the con shows step by step the crimes that took place as an investigation that our federal government did not successfully get to the American people and the media refused to cover. I'm absolutely convinced the media has a special deal somewhere because of the people that are in control that tells the media that you're not going to cover finance. Now, that's different than CNBC doing it all day to basically prop up stocks and talk about fluctuations and this and that. But their primary goal is to talk about trends and analysis and where you can make money and basically sell and pump. Okay? Great. That's what we do in capitalism. But at the same time, if they're not talking about the massive fraud and devastation that's occurred going back to the 2008 great financial crisis that everybody wants to walk right over, right? What you continually hear all the time when people talk about what's known as quantitative easing is that there's these bond purchase programs, but they don't tell you what's in the bonds. They didn't, for going back to 2009-ish, when Timothy Geithner proclaimed to the world that the American people are going to be foam on the runway for the crashing financial system. What that meant was we had millions of people that were put into liar's loans, that were through liar's appraisals and liar's derivatives and liar's securities and liar's everything else, that undergirded the goddamn bonds that blew up the world because of derivatives. It was blowing up everywhere. The derivatives were the last piece of the puzzle, which meant that they had to use the full faith and credit of the United States to give trillions of dollars to the guys that did that to us. They never left. They doubled down, they tripled down, they quadrupled down. By my count, what's going on right now with the Fed plunge protection team and the Treasury plunge protection team is Act 4 of what's taken place in the last 12 years. Guys, it's free money going to the richest that exist to be able to steal money from the system while everybody else struggles or goes down the tubes or loses their families or dies in anguish and squalor and everything else. This is not the United States. This is not dynamism based on free markets, based on the integrity of law, where bad guys go to jail and honest systems thrive. That's not what this is. It's the con. And I'm Patrick Lovell, and I'm literally the only person that has gone the distance to tell you the details of how this works. The longer you stay in the dark, the longer you will suffer from this system. The Con, www.thecon.tv. We march on the Fed, 11/1/22.